Welcome to Footy Talks, presented by Benjamin Moore. Great to have you with us on this Friday lunchtime. Let's get on to TFC right now because they, of course, are waiting for the next stage with the resumption of the regular season. And by all accounts, this next 6 games are going to be a TFC playing 3 times against Montreal, 3 times against Vancouver. They'll get some home games in there at BMO Field as well. Completely different environment to the one they've just been in at the Bubble. We haven't had one of these shows since they exited the tournament. As Greg Vanney and the players are sitting in their quarantine right now, waiting to get back onto the training pitch early next week, KJ, how would they assess, do you think, what happened down there in Orlando?
I think they would look at it as a successful trip in terms of bringing back key regular season points. I think that they obviously are not used to seeing other teams compete for trophies and sit back and watch other teams go, and that won't sit well with them. And I think Greg Vanney will hope that all members, but particular members who didn't necessarily give everything when they were down there, maybe, looking at that, thinking that hurts even more. And then obviously, I think they'll look at the standings now when everything's wiped clear from the tournament and think we're in a great position. I think that they'll look at it and think, you know, we're still in that position where we feel like we can get to the top of the Eastern Conference. We can get into this maybe if we want, but the rumors are that the expanded playoffs as well. I think it's crucial that they know that they need to get a home game, and more than one home game, by the way, not just a home game that then suddenly gets them into the last 4 or whatever, and they have to go away and then away again. I think they learned last season that you know nobody wins 3 away games in a row in a playoffs. So you don't want to be going away, and then away again in the final because no one's ever done it. So I think that they'll feel like that they need to build together some momentum now, Stephen, to be able to just take into the next games. They'll look at the Whitecaps in Montreal, no disrespect, but with a smile on their face a little bit. I think they're not ultimately massive contenders to win things in the trophy. In this, there'll be tough games, of course there will be, but they won't be intimidated by them. And I think they'll be they'll just be relishing to get back to playing BMO Field and having a chance to show their true identity as being what they believe as an elite MLS contender.
Yeah, I certainly think nothing changed there. I still think they believe themselves to be an elite MLS contender and someone who will be there or thereabouts come MLS Cup, whenever that may be, probably December time. The tournament, I would say satisfactory, KJ. I think they'll be happy with the 5 points for the group stage play. But, 2 points were left on the table with the DC game, which should have came their way. And then really the last 2 games for me, and I can't speak for Greg Vanney, I can only say what my opinion is, but there was some alarming things there in my opinion. They're in tough conditions, they're asked to play a lot of games in a short period of time in extreme heat. I get it, but I think Gonzalez was a bit of concern. I thought he looked really tired, really leggy. I'm hoping that he can be revitalised and get back to the level of play that we've seen from him since he's been wearing a TFC shirt. He's been absolutely immense, but yeah. I thought he looked very vulnerable in Orlando. I think that might be food for thought with Greg Vanney in terms of how high that line is for TFC, where they engage with their pressure. He may want to adjust that to get a little technical. And I think that the other one with me was, we're waxing lyrical about Michael Bradley starting the tournament like a house on fire. But I think at this point, again, games in quick succession, Michael Bradley can't play every minute, every game for TFC. They're going to have to spell him. They're going to have to take him off games. They're going to have to give other people a game at times if the games are going to be, when we think the schedule comes out, are going to be quite thick and fast. And in the midweek games, that will be something that I think will be food for thought for Greg Vanney. So satisfactory. I don't think they'll have lost a ton of confidence, but there'll be some things that are niggling with the coach's staff and making them think twice about how they're going to attack phase 1 and phase 2 of back to play.
It's Footy Talks presented by Benjamin Moore, and always great on these shows to be able to get some questions for you, whether it's through Zoom or on the Facebook link as well. So between now and the end of the show in the next 15 minutes or so, if you've got anything you want to ask, please do send some questions in. We've had a couple from Facebook already. Robert asks, KJ, besides Ayo Akinola, was there another TFC player who surprised you during the tournament?
just think about that for a second. Well, Akinola obviously had a marvelous tournament, and I think the story will continue to find out whether we can call Akinola Canadian or American. So we'll find out about that going forward, and let's hope he can lean on the Canadian side of things. I would say that I do think that Justin Morrow was a big loss for Toronto FC. I think they really lack that left side and the attack. But I was surprised how quickly Richie Laryea developed into a decent left back at that level. I do think that when initially I thought that he was going to play there, for me, it would have been easy to say Aro's a more accomplished player, has played there before, put Richie Laryea at right back. But Greg Vanney didn't want to do that because of the relationship that was moulding down that side that they worked hard on. And I think we saw examples of particularly early of Aro looking extremely fit and the best he's been. With Piatti and Pozuelo. So the relationship stayed there and will continue to blossom. But I do think, Stephen, that obviously the sooner they can get Justin Morrow back, the better. But Richie Laryea did well. He did okay there in that spot.
He did well. He was comfortable. He was quite reliable defensively. I think he's becoming more astute at playing fullback. To go across the left guys it's a big step. It sounds like not too much, you move to the other side, but the whole pitch looks different for how you've seen it basically your entire career. So that was a big challenge for Richie that he certainly passed for me. Aro surprised me, KJ. I thought he was competent in the last few games, but he was really, really good in the first couple. Getting forward on that right-hand side, looked fitter and more engaged than he's ever been, more positive than he's ever been. And I think TFC will be looking to try and just keep that going and keep them focused in that area. Any other positions? No, not too surprised. I like the partnership between Pozuelo and Pablo Piatti. I think it has a lot of potential. Moments of genius. Other times where maybe it's not quite happening like they would hope and they would see. But I think that's going to get better and better, isn't it? As these two guys start to understand each other's games and connect with, an Altidore or an Akinola, whoever's going to be up top there. It's pretty tasty for TFC when you think about that trio of Altidore, Piatti and Pozuelo finding spaces and pockets to play little triangles with each other. They're going to be a match for anybody.
You talked about Auro there, and Greg Vanney said to us, didn't he, that coming out of the lockdown, Auro was probably in better shape than he ever has been. He'd done an awful lot of work and came out looking really strong physically, as well as the way he was developing and training in terms of what Greg Vanney needs from him. It wasn't just Auro, it was Pozuelo as well that Greg Vanney talked about in glowing terms in terms of being in a better position physically now than 12 months ago. So there are a couple of positives for TFC. Sam says, considering the tricky transfer market during COVID, do you think TFC will be adding any players at this point in 2020? I mean, it seems as if, KJ, that they'll settle with what they've got, doesn't it, at the moment? I think Ali Curtis has generally talked about the fact that he is pretty pleased with where the squad is at, with the fact that they did their additions in the off-season, not having to make those big moves mid-season like they did last year, bringing in Omar Gonzalez, Gallardo, a couple of others in that July window. For TFC, do you think what you see is what you get?
I think it's going to be very close. They may sprinkle a couple of things in there or one thing in there, but I'm with you. Just the two things that you said. By the way, this team's also not flush with financial flexibility. By the way, it's pretty tight against what they've already got, and Michael Bradley, is changed his contract and they moved him away from the DP to bring in Pablo Piatti. They're doing everything they can to just try to get the most at the margins they can possibly get, and that may, I think. Obviously, I don't think I know that will be very different with the removal of a couple of contracts by the end of 2020. And, depending on what they want to do with Pablo Piatti, depending on whether they keep him ready, they may put Michael Bradley's contract back to being a DP, which actually would give you more financial flexibility potentially. There's different things you can do there. But no, I don't believe right now that is there's a lot to come in. But I would say this, just to piggyback off your point, I wrote a piece on TSN at the start of the tournament where I think there's another level for TFC if they want it. And I think what we're all talking about here is the pillars that when you look about that level are there. It's Auro, who could be a big game changer, bringing that width and that power down the right-hand side. If Pablo Piatti can play at significant minutes with Pozuelo as a 10, and they can bring that, that's another level. And the other level that no one's really talking about right now is Altidore, because he hasn't played. He just hasn't played. But I'm telling you this, Ayo Akinola is a really good player, and it's great to see him playing, and it's exciting for TFC, and he needs to be nurtured. But when Altidore's on the field, they come alive. It's a completely different team. And that's the key, Stevie, for me, is that, yeah, other people may come in or they may get a transfer, everything, but that's the key for TFC going forward. I don't want to go as far as to say that they're not going to win a trophy if Altidore's not in the field, but it's pretty clear for me they need to get him back healthy and fit. And they'll be all, for me, I think he'll be a motivated man that could have, a lot of goals at the end of the season if they can get him on the field.
Yeah, I agree with you. It'll be extremely difficult for TFC to win a trophy without Altidore fit and firing. I'm not talking about a Josie Altidore that comes on for 30 minutes and is clearly not up to his usual speed and fitness levels. He needs to get fit, and he needs to get back to the kind of form, 2017 when he was on fire. If they can get him like that, then they've got another game changer to go along with Piatti, Pozuelo, and then the options that they'll have. That, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, KJ. That's the key for Greg Vanney. How can he get a bit more out of these wonderful players that he has? How can he get them performing at their optimal level rather than just 7 out of 10? Now Auro and Altidore 6 and 7 out of 10 is better than a lot of players, but every coach wants to get maximum out of his team, maximum out of his individuals. And I think if Greg Vanney can really try and get the maximum out of an Auro and an Altidore, particularly they two, but maybe some of his wider guys as well, getting a bit of an improvement there from a Schaffelberg and can get a bit more out of an Endo, then I think they'll have a genuine contender, because the league's better again, isn't it, guys?
Yeah,
the standard's better again. There's more depth. The quality of these teams are getting stronger and stronger, and so you have to get better every single month, every single year.
We talked about that last night, Stevie, the fact that moving into the last half of this season, this tournament has been great for us as people who are invested watching the league a lot of the time and working in it, to see these teams on a more regular basis. I don't remember the last season I would have sat down and watched 5 whole San Jose Earthquakes games or whatever it is from a team across the league. But this has given us the opportunity with the spread out games to be able to do that. So from what you've seen, is it still those teams at the top, LAFC, Seattle Sounders, Toronto FC, that everybody talks about and everybody expects to be the favourites coming in? Or are teams now closing the gap? The likes we talked about the last few days of a Philadelphia Union, the likes of an Orlando, a Minnesota United. When it comes down to it at the end, are there going to be more teams that are fighting for MLS Cup year by year here?
I think so. I do think they are. I think particularly this year, with a limited number of people in stadiums, probably, if any, when we get back to the playoffs and stuff like that. I think it's a leveler. I wonder what KG thinks in a minute, but because you've got these big game guys, the perennial candidates that we feel just rise to the occasion, and when the crowd gets bigger and the kind of magnitude of the game is increased, they're the ones that we always go back to, and it's because of reference points, because we've seen them do it before. But this tournament's taught me that this might just be a year for the teams with great style to the way that they're trying to play. And I'm thinking Orlando here, we're coached extremely well, a couple of good additions, guys that have been around Europe, been around football for a number of years, the Nanis, the Pereiras, the Akindelis, guys that kind of know how to get it done. They might just fancy their chances this year when we get back to the regular season and eventually the playoffs and the MLS Cup, because I think there's a lot of parity. Minnesota, Portland, I've really enjoyed Houston. Were brilliant at the start of this tournament, KJ. Can they find a little bit extra? I think there's a lot to be said for kind of team play this year and continuity. If one team can really get that through this and they kind of know who they're going to select week in, week out, then I think they're going to have a good chance of winning MLS Cup.
Yeah, I think what we've seen over the last few weeks is that the teams that have succeeded in this tournament have had the balance and they've had stability. And they're really crucial words, stability to the way that the team plays, stability to the roster and the team that are playing 8, 9, 10 starters every time, play every game. And I think that they're starting to create identities, that it's exciting. I still think, the league is getting towards the European model a bit where the giants are going away. But I do think that this year could be very different, as Stephen said. And I also think I think that to take the league forward next, those teams that we've just talked about, Orlando with Pereira, Minnesota is going to get Reynoso, Columbus went and got Zella Ryan, Sporting Kansas City went and got Pulido. There's so many. I'll keep going if you want, but I won't. But what I'm saying is that these teams now are spending the money to get better. So whether they win or not, they're making the overall league better. And those top teams like Toronto FC, Seattle Sounders, LAFC are pushing these teams to be better. I think of it like this. I think of it like you think about like a beach. And you think that you call it like the scouting and development beach, right? And then TFC and LAFC and Seattle Sounders and these teams, they've been out in the water for a long time. They've been digging. They're well gone. And too many teams over the last few years have been standing at the edge, tipping the toes in the water. And now they're going. Now they're getting better. You've got to scout better. You've got to recruit better. You've got to develop better. And if you're not going to do it, and by the way, there's a few teams left in the MLS who aren't doing it still, you're getting left behind. You're not MLS 2, you're going to be MLS 3 pretty quick. So if that's the difference, there's a massive difference now. And the teams that are catching up, we've seen them in this tournament succeed because they're recruiting really good. They're getting difference makers. They're spending the money that they should be spending. And the rest of the teams that aren't, they're still going to be behind.
Some teams still standing on the boardwalk with their socks and shoes on. And
I'm in the tiki bar at the beach having a pina colada.
That's like me when I go to the beach. I don't want to get the sand on my feet. By the way, how long have you been holding on to that analogy, KJ? That's exceptional. You didn't
I just thought about it now, honestly.
Not just think about that.
I did. I just thought about it now, honestly. Something you don't even want to know what goes on sometimes in there. But I do think that from the recruitment point of view, that's how I think. Everyone just looks at the elite teams. They spend the most money. Well, go look at how much Raul Ruidiaz is getting paid. Okay, he's not getting paid $9 million. Okay, so you need to be able to recruit smartly and intelligently, and that's the key now. And these teams that are left, look at Pereira last night at number 10, an absolute magician who ran the show. Okay, if you can't get players like Zella Ryan at Columbus has guided that team through this tournament, he's been marvelous. And you're not going to get players like that anymore. You're going to get left behind, but you've got to get them right. There's been a lot of examples where guys think they've got that guy and they haven't. So that comes down to scouting. It comes down to development. And then obviously, go out there, recruit well and be intelligent with that.
That wraps up this week's edition of Footy Talks. We'll be back with you every week between now and the end of the season, and hopefully some games to talk about coming very soon with TFC getting back into action, probably with games against the Whitecaps and Montreal. Should be some fun times ahead. Thanks to everyone for being with us today. Stevie, KJ, we'll see you on Tuesday night on TSN for the final of the MLS's back tournament.
Have a good week.
Thanks, everyone.